Welcome to the Region Free Gamers Podcast, Episode 4. Today's episode, it's party time.
Here we go!
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Region Free Gamers Podcast, the podcast that is fluent in gaming. And for this episode, appropriately enough, the party episode, we have 3/4 of the crew all in one place. So we have to the right of me, Paul.
My name's Paul. I like video games.
And Ozzy.
Please refer to me as Lucky Ozzy from now on.
And then with us in our hearts, if not in our souls, all the way in Helsinki, is Masa.
Hey yo!
And so I think for this episode, what we wanted to do is just have like a little rundown of maybe like what we think are party games and some of our favorites throughout the years. So I did want to establish, obviously, as we always do, a few ground rules. But obviously, before that, let's talk about a little bit about what we've been playing currently. So Paul, do you want to start us off?
Sure, yeah. I've got a couple I can get into. In preparation for the Ni No Kuni 2, for the sequel to the original, I tore through the original in about 3 months. A tidy 3 months. And
Tidy, eh?
Yeah, tidy. Dude, best game I've ever played that has a character speaking in a Welsh accent.
It's awesome.
I know, it's great. There's a part in that game where two of the Welsh fairies, they have like a comedy routine.
Oh yeah?
And it is actually genuinely funny. It's not like they tell a bunch of shitty jokes and you laugh because they sound funny, which is borderline racist.
I mean, could you be racist against Welsh people?
Well,
I guess so.
Let me put it... I don't want to get into this racial topic.
You could be stereotypical, let's just say that.
No, that...
The Region Free Gamers Podcast will not go into this topic.
But yeah, dude, it was a pretty good game. If it had a better battle system, it would be like an all-time great RPG. But as it stood, the battle system was kind of frustrating at times, because you mainly control one character, and then you have your other two NPCs, and they just kind of do that thing in RPGs that drives us all crazy, where they just do whatever the fuck they want. And so, like, I'll equip them with one particular Pokemon that I want them to use, and I'll say, okay, Swain, use this Pokemon, and then Swain says, suck a dick, Paul, I'm gonna use this really crappy one, and then I lose my mind. But there's enough in the game that, you know, kind of overcomes that frustration.
Well, I played the game maybe for 20 hours, which for an RPG, it's kind of not even 1/3 into the way.
Yeah.
And I found it so charming. It was extremely beautiful in its Studio Ghibli aesthetic. And the story of Oliver losing his mother and wanting to bring back his mother somehow was very heartwarming and sad in some way. There's something that didn't click for me. The big thing that didn't click for me was the battle theme, which is probably one of the worst battle themes on any RPG that I can remember.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And it sucks because the whole soundtrack was done by Joe Hisaishi, who is the Studio Ghibli composer. So and I think the soundtrack as a whole is great. I mean, the overworld theme is fantastic. I freaking love the overworld theme. But the other part of it is that the battle system is so just complex and unnecessarily so at times that every time I would stop playing the game for maybe a week, I would just forget what the hell it is that I needed to do and how it worked. So at one point, I just gave up. But I am looking forward to Ni No Kuni 2. It's already released by the time that we're recording this. And I hear good things about it. And I mean, it still looks beautiful. So yeah. I will definitely play it at some point.
Yeah, I gotta say, I actually also played Ni No Kuni for around 20 hours, and based on that, I would have to say that, like, Paul mentioned the whole Wales accent thing, and when it comes to my ranking of games with characters with the Wales accent, it would only be my number 2, because there's, like, in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, there's one, and it's not just a, like, some NPC, but, like, one of the main characters has a Welsh accent, and she is freaking awesome. So, yeah, that's my number 2, and Ni No Kuni would be my number 2 in this ranking.
I have never played Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I can confidently say that you are 100% wrong. Mr. Drippy is one of the greatest characters ever.
I will agree with Paul. But at least one thing has come out of this. Wales is representing, man. So,
oh, yeah, man.
To all of our Welsh listeners, we're keeping an eye out for you.
Yeah, represent.
All right. So what have you been playing, Arnie?
So I finished Trails of Cold Steel 1.
Hell yeah.
After
my man.
375,000 hours. And then, get ready for this, I started playing Trails of Cold Steel 2.
I told you, man, like, that's what I said. Like, that's, like, exactly what I said. I was like, yeah, I mean, it's a slow burn, but, like, once you get to the end, you'll be like, oh, goddamn, I just gotta start playing the second game, like, as soon as possible.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, like, I started playing the second game, and I'm like, I'm gonna get through this one, and then I'll be done. And then I realized there's a third game that hasn't been localized yet, and there's a fourth game that's going to be released this year.
Yeah, exactly.
So, the fourth game will be released locally or just in Japan?
Yeah, I'm actually quite sure. Like, it hasn't been announced yet, but both 1 and 2 sold fairly well in the West, despite being, like, of course, there's the Vita version, but the other, like, the PS3 version, like, PS3 was already, like, dying or basically, like, dead, because those were, like, very, very late PS3 releases, but despite that, they did fairly well in the West, so I'm quite sure that both, like, 3 and 4 will come out in the West eventually. It just hasn't been announced yet, but yeah, I'm fair sure that some, like, let's say NIS America or Axis or Exceed, they might already be, like, working on the localization.
Yeah, that's what I hope, because at this point, I can't not know, you know what I mean? Like, I have to.
Yeah.
They're ready to invest
I have to play it.
Yeah, I actually, like, I mean, you guys know that I really love this whole franchise, and I ended up importing Trails of Cold Steel 3 from Japan. I haven't really played it that much, but I can already tell. Does it have an
English option?
What?
Does it have an English option? Like
No, it doesn't. No. There's like nothing in English except some of the menus, but I can already tell that it's when it comes to the graphics and the battle system, it's definitely a big improvement over the first 2 games.
Awesome. So actually, Masa, since you're already talking, what have you been playing?
Yeah, there's a few games. I'm not sure if all of these are like worth talking about, but I did actually finish a few games since we last did this segment. First of all, there's Kirby Star Allies on the Switch. Not a bad game, but definitely not worth like 60 to 70 euros.
Yeah.
It's far too short and way too easy. Like, I had a lot of fun playing that game. I played some of it with my girlfriend, and we had a blast. But then, when it ended, like, it took me around 5 hours to finish the game. And even my completion percentage was, like, around 70%. Like, I got, like, most of the, like, the secret stuff during my first playthrough. But when it ended, I was a bit like, oh, that's it? Okay, this was really cool, but yeah. But I have to say, the final boss fight is one of the best boss fights in the in like any Kirby game. But I would say
I'm always constantly surprised at the amount of Kirby games that are being released. I think there have been like 4 over the last 2 years, maybe. And
yeah,
I remember there was a period that there were no Kirby games whatsoever.
Yeah, but like I'm not surprised since a lot of these. The 3DS got a couple of kind of like spin-off games, and then a lot of these main titles, they aren't like that long, so I can't really imagine that it takes, that much time to actually develop these games.
Well, Kirby's in that weird position where it's a game that a lot of people love, but it's one of the more younger audience-oriented Nintendo games. And it's one of the more easy games in the Nintendo staples. So I'm not surprised that there's not a lot for you to do in Star Allies, because I would imagine that this is more geared at a younger audience who would probably take a longer time in order to beat this.
Yeah, agreed.
They're not difficult games at all whatsoever.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, a 5-hour game that you enjoy, and it's not going to make you throw your controller in frustration, is perfectly reasonable. But, when you're looking at the actual monetary value, how much you've spent, then that's where you kind of run into issues.
Certainly. But I remember playing Kirby's Epic Yarn, and I played that game at a point that I was kind of jaded. And playing a game that was not difficult, that was charming, that had great music, it was just perfect at the moment. And so I fell in love with that. So I guess what I'm saying is that Kirby sometimes is the perfect antidote to a jaded, cynical 28-year-old.
After you've played Dark Souls for 10 hours.
After I played Dark Souls for like 2 weeks, which I was gonna talk about that,
but yeah, I gotta say, like the game that I finished right before Kirby was Yakuza Kiwami. So like the contrast between those two games, like holy shit. But I mean, yeah, I gotta say, Star Allies was the perfect game to play after Kiwami, because Kiwami, holy shit, that game has some of the most, like the darkest, most fucked up plot twist that I've seen like in any game. Like there were moments when I was like just staring at the screen after like something really dramatic happened. I was like, man, I'm not sure if I can continue playing this anymore. Because it was like there's some really, really dark and fucked up shit in that game. But yeah, overall I would say Kiwami is definitely, it's not as good as Yakuza 0, which we talked about in an earlier episode. But I mean, it's understandable because, of course, Kiwami is a remake of the first Yakuza game from 2006. And the biggest thing about Kiwami is that, like, why it's not quite on the same level as, for example, 0 is that, like, the crazy side quest that we talked about earlier. Yeah, there's a lot of side quests here, but a lot of them are just like, okay, so, go from point A to point B and beat up a bunch of bad guys, and that's it. Yeah. Like, there's nothing really crazy and wacky happening. There's a few decent side quests, but yeah, that was definitely a letdown after playing 0. But other than that,
it's a 12-year-old game at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the problem. And I'm really looking forward to Kiwami 2, which releases this year. It's just recently been announced for the West. So that should be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Coming out in August. And what's special about Kiwami 2 is that, unlike Kiwami 1, like Kiwami 1 is still using the same engine, like the older Yakuza engine, that you have seen in like games like, I think, Yakuza 5, maybe 4, and then 0. But Kiwami 2 actually has the new Dragon engine that we will first see in Yakuza 6, which is launching in 10 days. April 17th. So, and I have heard that since Kiwami 2 is the latest game in the series, like, it actually runs a lot better and has like much more improved gameplay, even compared to like Yakuza 6.
Well, let me talk a little bit about what I have been playing. I was going to talk about Bloodborne because that's what's just driven a stake through my soul over the last, I would say, month. So I don't know if I really want to spend all the time talking about my defeats and occasional glories.
I don't mind listening about your defeats.
There's that, but
saw quite a few last night.
Yeah, but there were quite a few, which we will talk about very shortly.
You are quite a sadist.
Yes. I am a masochist. I am a glutton for punishment. But no, so I instead will talk about what we played last night, which doesn't quite fall into the party game mold, but it made me realize how awesome it really was. And Paul and I had a little mini tournament with Soul Calibur 2. And I had played Soul Calibur 2 on the Xbox way back when it released, and I liked it, but I thought that I preferred the earlier versions, the predecessors. But last night, when I picked it up after not having played it for over a decade, certainly, it just really dawned on me how deep and intuitive this game really is. And Paul and I just kind of started really just getting more accustomed to the mechanics and getting more comfortable with it. And as Paul mentioned, there is no half-quarter circle moves or anything. Everything just makes sense. If you want to swing low, you press down on the like, and it goes for a low attack. And it's very easy to get into, and as the adage goes, difficult to master. And so before you knew it, Paul and I had 33 or 34 matches.
Yeah.
And it was funny because at first I started just dominating with Raphael because he has a very strong high-low attack with a very long reach, which is kind of unavoidable or indefensible. And Paul, little by little with Nightmare, started getting the hang of it. And he just started adapting. And eventually we got to a level where we were both kind of equally matched. And so that made it for a very thrilling game session, and at the end I was sweating, so it was extremely fun, extremely stress-inducing at some points, because Paul had a very good mechanism for getting me out of the ring, and so he would back me into a corner, and I would be like, no, and I would die.
And then I would feast on his panic and just knock him right out. It's fantastic.
So all I'm trying to say is that Soul Calibur, I think after last night, I've kind of reassessed my opinion of it, and I actually really look forward to playing it again. Hopefully with Paul and Arnie, since they're here for the weekend. So yeah, that's what I've been playing lately.
But yeah, hold up. So now that you guys, had that mini tournament, you forgot to mention, like, who is now the official Region 3 gamer Soul Calibur 2 champion?
Oh, undetermined.
Oh.
we're gonna have to go at it again tonight, and then we can determine that I'm the champion.
Yeah, I would say it ended in a draw.
I think it ended in a draw because at first, as I said, I won 9 matches, and around match 5, Paul said, if I don't win by 10 matches, I'm just dropping this. And so match 9, he actually beat me, and that's when things started getting a little bit more even balanced. And it's funny because I started trying different characters, but eventually I just settled back on Raphael, and I really focused on getting really good at it. And Paul knew almost all the attacks that I was kind of relying upon, so I was then forced to adapt. So it made for a very interesting dynamic that I honestly think that it made it very fun. So I haven't played Arnie yet, so I'm pretty sure that he's a ringer in all this.
I know, right? He was just sitting there watching us, learning, absorbing.
You guys are fools. So I'm determined yet, and I think honestly we can't really judge it based on what we had yesterday because we were just kind of getting our bearings, and I was being so cheap. I literally was being like the Eddie Gordo of Soul Calibur yesterday. Yeah. I was just using the same attacks over and over until Paul figured them out, and then that made it an actual game, and it made an actual tournament. So the jury's out for now, but according to Paul, he's gonna be the. He's just unaware right now.
I only play a competitive pit fighter on the SNES, so that's why you haven't played me yet.
Dude, I only play digitized sprite graphic games, so
I only play the cream of the crop.
We have to play Street Fighter, the movie, the game, the movie, the game.
Dude, Way of the Warrior. That's what we need to play. Naughty Dog's gem.
Oh, the 3DO system seller.
Yeah, I mean,
oh my god! I just got this. Like, Nintendo needs to release a game called Way of the Wario.
Oh, that would be awesome. What would that entail?
It's a Way of the Samurai remake, but starring Wario.
I think it would be like, it would have to have realistic digitized graphics, so they have like an actual guy playing Wario.
Just have Charles Barkley.
Just get like Ron Jeremy or something.
Dude, how about this? Charles Barkley as Wario.
No, Masa had it right, dude. Ron Jeremy.
Ron Jeremy.
Yeah.
Oh, that is right. You imagine though that they made like a realistic Wario Thief game where you like have to stake out encase your
dude. Pre-order.
Yeah,
pre-order.
that would be so
take
awesome.
my money.
I don't know. I really am saying that I want a Wario game, a new Wario game of any sort.
You're getting it.
Way of the Wario.
That would be so awesome. With digitized graphics, as played by Ron Jeremy. So that would be it.
Well, they did it with, Conker's Bad Fur Day. They turned Conker from, the goody-goody Conker's Pocket Tales into the foul-mouthed squirrel. Why wouldn't they be able to do something similar with Wario? Honestly, hire Ron Jeremy. Get it done.
Just do it. Just do it.
Of course, Nintendo will never.
Nintendo will not do it because they're not that cool. No, yeah.
All right. Anything else anybody's been playing recently that we should touch on?
Well, maybe Final Fantasy 15, because that's the game that I'm actually playing currently. Yeah, we have at least, Paul and Arnie, you guys have finished it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm currently halfway done the game, and yeah, I have very, very mixed feelings about it. How did you guys feel about the game?
You will continue to have mixed feelings about it until the end.
I'm quite sure about that. The highs are really high, but then, the lows are, almost, unbearable.
I know, dude. For me, it's almost the opposite of Ni No Kuni, in that Ni No Kuni has this charming story and, cartoony presentations and so on. But the combat's horrendous. And in Final Fantasy 15, you have this storyline where, the characters are pretty good, Ignis notwithstanding. But
you really do hate Ignis, don't you?
I can't stand that guy.
I like Ignis.
Dude, why is he wearing gloves? They're walking through a desert.
He's driving.
He's driving. Dude, I'll smack you if you drive with gloves. Jesus Christ. But the combat in Final Fantasy 15 is a revelation. It's so fantastic. It looks great. It feels great. And I have all day for that. So, that'll last you until the end. Just the fun of the combat. And then the frustrating part will be kind of figuring out what's going on story-wise.
Oh yeah, did you, speaking of which, did you guys watch the movie?
No.
Yeah, you have to watch it. Which is really fucked up about the whole game. I made it to chapter 6, and I was why are we on this road trip? Why? What is going on? It was kind of in Trails of Cold Steel. When I was wondering, what is the point of this whole game? But in Final Fantasy 15, I watched the movie while I was playing chapter 6, and then that movie explains what happens right before the game begins.
Does it make the story more interesting to you?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It kind of gives you a motive to keep going. Cause
Gotcha.
If you don't watch the movie, then you are well, we have to save someone. We have to, go there and save the world for whatever reason. But the movie actually gives you that reason.
Okay, I see.
Have you ever tried cooking with gloves on? Who cooks with gloves on?
I think it's for the magic.
Christ's sakes.
So he doesn't burn his hands.
Is he the one with a British accent?
Yes.
Of course, because he would totally have a British accent.
Oh my god, that's another thing in that game. The accents. Where are they getting these accents from? These are Earth accents, and they're not on Earth. Where is the equivalent of Britain that Ignis is coming? Jesus
I would love for a game to just create some weird, nonsensical accents.
I feel like that's really difficult without coming off as racist or
that's true.
Yeah, that may be true. And that's the second time we go into race here. So let's steer away from that. But no, it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you guys ever seen Monty Python's Flying Circles.
Yeah.
But the Ministry of Silly Walks, where it's just do the silliest accent that you can do, just go with it. I mean, I kind of think back Final Fantasy 12, that Van had an Icelandic accent. There should be more characters with really out there accents. I don't know, maybe a Thai accent or just not the standard British people equal bad or sophisticated.
Yeah.
And I don't know, is there a German accent anywhere in any games?
I sure hope not.
Yeah. I think Operation Darkness, which is great, has German Nazi vampires.
Wow.
I'm in.
You couldn't have done a better job selling me in 5 words or less.
But no, so to answer your question, Masa, for me at least, it was, like Paul said, it's like Final Fantasy is the characters, the story, the goofiness, like the fun stuff it lets you do, and the combat. The side quests are terrible.
Agreed.
A lot of the secondary characters, like the people who aren't your main party, are not relevant and like not interesting. But the core group of like the 4 guys is like, at least for me, was worth following to the end of this adventure.
Ozzy, you won't believe this. Ignis is the smart character, and he wears glasses.
That's pretty surprising, honestly.
I know, I've never seen anything like it.
But yeah, I think like once I finish the game, we should probably like do a micro episode about it.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about that game.
No, there definitely is, and I promise if we do that, I won't complain about Ignis the whole time.
So guys, maybe since you guys are here in New York, I know that both you, Paul, and you, Arnie, have had a little bit of a haul in your game pickups over the last week or so. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about those?
I can't wait to tell Masa that I got Etrian Mystery Dungeon.
Congrats. Or should I say, my condolences? Because that's gonna be the only game you will be playing for the next, I don't know, 5 or 6 months.
I can't wait to tell you all about it. Constantly. No, I picked up that, and I picked up Sakura Wars for the PS2, which I've never seen out in the wild. And frankly, until like a couple months ago, I didn't even know it existed. I used to play that game back when I had patience for Japanese games on the Saturn, and I hadn't seen a Sakura Wars game for like almost 20 years or something. So I saw that one at the store. It was reasonably priced, and yeah, now I have it.
Yeah, I actually have the Wii version of that, and it's a very, very unique game. Okay, yes. So first of all, I know that this is gonna sound like I'm describing Fire Emblem when I say that it's a strategy JRPG with like dating sim elements.
Oh yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, but it's made like a visual novel, and the way you boost the characters are through like all these conversations and stuff. So like, I believe that you don't really even get XP from the actual fights, and the emphasis is definitely more on the visual novel parts. But it's a very, very fun and unique game.
Yeah, I'm pretty hyped about it. I'll probably play it, I don't know, maybe later this year or something.
It's not even very long. It's like, I don't know, maybe 15 hours.
Ooh. Okay, well, maybe it'll move up in the rotation then. Yeah. Sure. And also worth noting, picked up Raiden, however you want to pronounce it, Raiden Fighters for the Xbox 360. Arnie happened to find another copy of it, and he's like, here you go. And I said, thank you very much, sir.
Oh yeah, speaking of which, like Arnie, would you like to tell us the story about that game, like, and the struggle of getting it?
Oh my, Jesus Christ. It's like, and I feel like I'm the only person this ever happens to, but I'm sure I'm not, where I find a game at GameStop, always at GameStop, and it's like a game I've been looking for forever, it's cheap, I find the case and manual, I'm like, this is great. So I go up the counter, and without fail, 5 out of 6 times, the person is like, we don't have this. It's like,
and it's usually that game that you're really seeking.
And so, it's like, but it amazes me, like, I'm holding a case and manual for a game. How do you have this, but you don't have the game?
Yeah, but it's usually the opposite. Like, they have the game, but not the case and the manual.
And what our listeners can't
Somewhere
see,
at like another GameStop, there's somebody like with a game and no case and manual.
And what our listeners can't see is Arnie pantomiming the stupid look on the GameStop employee's face as they do not have this game. Oh, it's gold.
It's amazing.
But you finally managed to hit gold.
I did. I had to get a copy transferred from a second GameStop that did not have the case and manual. And I was able to get a complete copy.
Nice.
But it was a nightmare. Alright, so I think with this, we're ready to jump into the meat of the topic, if you will. So, party games.
Bust out your party poppers, we're going to party!
So, just to throw it out there, and I do want to get your guys' opinion on this, but at least to me, a party game, and I cast a pretty wide net when it comes to party games. There's really only two criteria. It has to be more than 2 players. There are exceptions to this rule, but very few. And it also has to be local multiplayer only. No online. I made an exception to LAN when it comes to like PC games. But other than that, you have to be in the same room with the person.
Well, I think you could have different definitions of it, and it depends on how broad and how narrow you go. You could be narrow and say, well, it's as you say that it's 3+ party games, and it could be like a Mario Party type where it's designed to be, quote unquote, a party game, and it's designed to entertain a broad group of people. Mm-hmm. But you could also just say it could even be a 2-player game where you kind of switch the controller once someone loses, and that could also be considered a party game of some sort. But that
Did you just say 2 players?
Yeah, you could.
That's incorrect.
Well, potentially, but you see something like Nidhogg, and Nidhogg is just 2 players, and you could have like a tournament like that. So, but I think for our purposes in particular, I don't think that would be what would be encompassing this episode. It should ideally be more than 2 players. It should be 3+ players, and have an emphasis, I think, on entertainment for an audience, for a large audience. So it literally is a game that you can use as a host in order to entertain guests and the like, or to have a game night and stuff like that, for people that may have different interests. So a party game may not necessarily be that complex. Everyone can get into it. You may have varying levels of game experience and game knowledge, but it would still be fun for everyone. Yeah. So again, Mario Party would be the standard bearer, but we're not encompassing just Mario Party. There are so many others that could fall within the rubric of a party game. There are some outliers like Guardian Heroes, as Paul very well knows, but those I think you can kind of fit into it, but that's Treasure. Treasure just does things differently.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But is that like an agreeable
it's a good starting point. We'll have heated arguments.
I mean, once we start bringing up the games, we're gonna like go to war with each other and bust out the big guns.
Well, I think the most important thing is that like being able to play with a large group of people is like something that I think people have always wanted to do. I don't think it's like something that emerged when like systems started coming with 4 controller ports. I don't think Nintendo was like the sort of vanguard for like, hey, get all your friends together and like play. I think people have been trying to do that since like the early arcade days, You'd get your friends together, you'd huddle over a machine, and you'd sort of take turns playing. But eventually, arcade cabinets started including like more than 2-player options. Gauntlet is probably the earliest I can think of.
Definitely the earliest I can think of.
Yeah, there's probably like earlier machines, but that's the one that I think sort of solidified the idea of like 4-player cooperative arcade play. I saw Quartet is like another early example of that. It's like a side-scrolling shooter. But I think, at least that I remember most fondly, the like 90s were the like dawn of a lot of these games, like TMNT, which actually that was like late 80s, right?
Maybe.
Yeah. The Simpsons arcade, the X-Men arcade, like all these arcade machines really like solidified the idea in your mind of you can go to the arcade with 3 or 4 of your friends and you can all play together. And it's like I think it's, at least for me, is what identifies, like that's how I identify the arcade experience, as like something communal, not one person in front of a machine necessarily.
But I also feel, and again, this is where we're going to start digressing, that a party game inherently, it's meant to be played at a house or in a domestic setting and not out in the public.
Yeah.
Because in the public, it's just a social I guess it's arbitrary, but it just makes more sense that a party will take place within the confines of a house or even like an event or something like that. Whereas an arcade is more just what I would call just more standard multiplayer.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess it sounds arbitrary, but it makes sense in my head. I had to come up with a more conceptualized explanation for this.
I think my justification is like I see this more as the seed of like scratching that itch for people that made them eventually be like, I want this in my house.
Well, look, dude, I mean, it's the reason for the existence of anticipation on the NES. I mean, that's kind of the hallmark of party games, and Nintendo trying to capture that zeitgeist of people wanting to play party games at home.
Well, and also, I mean, you had birthday parties at Chuck E. Cheese, like that's a party if I've ever seen one.
Yes, you did have birthday parties.
Strong argument.
That's a good argument. But then again, we're just that's such a broad net that we're throwing out there, if that's the case. But no, I mean, I think generally, yes, you do need, there is that itch, as you say, of trying to play games with various people. And we're so used to games being kind of a solitary experience that you can kind of forget that games were really meant to be, one, something for kids to be entertained and the like, and two, something for everyone to just kind of share in this experience. And they're kind of a logical evolution of like Monopoly or Life or any of these other board games that you tend to see and which people used to use in order to entertain themselves and host a game night. And I think video games actually try to get into that market. I don't think that successfully, to be perfectly honest, except maybe late 90s, early 2000s, where there was just kind of a peak of the party game. I still think people will play Monopoly or whatever other variation of party games there are out there. But I think they position themselves as an evolution of that form of game, which is also why I think it's more of a domestic setting. I mean, you're not going to play Monopoly at Chuck E. Cheese. Maybe you do. Maybe there are weird people that go to Chuck E. Cheese to play Monopoly.
The coolest kids at Chuck E. Cheese, let me tell you.
So maybe there are. But yeah, I mean, I think they've always tried to reach that kind of goal of having a game that's accessible to everyone and that everyone can enjoy and partake in.
Yeah. I think that, just quickly moving through some of the early attempts, I think the earliest I can think of like more than 2 players on a home console is probably the NES Satellite. Paul, I would ask you if the Master System had any games that were more than 2 player that you can think of.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
No.
And I mean the NES, as far as I can tell, the Satellite wasn't even like hugely supported.
No.
Games like Super Off-Road, Super Spike V-Ball, Play Action Football, like the classics we all remember playing for hours on end as children.
The problem with something like the Satellite when we were kids is that we were kids. We couldn't just go out and buy it. It's kind of hard to convince your parents to go out and buy a peripheral, especially when your choice is peripheral or game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if I'm going to the game store and I have a choice between Dracula's Curse and an NES Satellite, come on.
And especially since games were so much more expensive at the time.
Yeah.
And so this really, buying a peripheral, you really needed to justify it. And if there are really not enough games to make that purchase worthwhile, then why even consider it, to be honest?
Yeah.
But there are some NES games. I mean, I know that Technos did a lot of like multiplayer-oriented games and the like. And one of those, Paul, maybe you can talk about.
Well, Super Spike V... Here's the thing about Super Spike V-Ball, is that I played the crap out of it as a kid. Never 4 players, though.
Yeah.
Right? Because nobody I knew had a satellite. We were just buying games. But with that said, if I had an opportunity to play Super Spike V-Ball today with 4 players, it'd be great. That game's aged really well. And also notable for being the only game I successfully played with a Power Glove.
What?
I know, right?
I thought that was impossible.
Well, I just kind of like... You have this Power Glove. It looks so cool. And then there's the commercial with the guy playing Punch-Out. And so I was pretty determined to make it work for at least one game. And it did. Because like you kind of... I think you curl your finger or something and it creates a turbo.
Oh.
And turbo in Super Spike V-Ball is basically cheating. So, yeah. So it was worth it at the time because that was the only turbo controller that I had.
Gotcha.
So in order to cheat a Super Spike V-Ball, I would use it for the turbo, but then curse at the horrible actual movement control.
Well, if you want to dig a little bit further, though, the NES also gave us Itadaki Street, which was many decades later translated as Fortune Street and localized as Fortune Street. Now, I have never played the NES version of Itadaki Street. It's actually made by Yuhi Horii, who is of Dragon Quest fame. And it actually started as a minigame in Dragon Quest, and then there was demand to make this into a full-blown game.
Only the Japanese.
But it was never localized until 2008, where Fortune Street came out on the Wii with a kind of crossover with Mario characters and Dragon Quest characters. But I don't know much about Itadaki Street, Fortune Street, so maybe, Arnie, you can tell me a little bit more about what that game entails.
To say that I know anything about Fortune Street would imply that I played it and understood it. I sort of fumbled my way through like half a game of Fortune Street, and it really is, I mean, to break it down to its simplest level, it probably, I guess the most appropriate comparison would be Monopoly, but infinitely more, like, pedantically complicated.
Soul-crushing.
Yes.
Yes.
Like, stocks involved, percentages are involved, like, keeping track of so many different things that I don't understand. I guess the target audience was, like, young adults on the Wii.
Well, I think
that doesn't really...
I think it may be, if I think about it, maybe it was training young adults to become professional salarymen. So that should be from what I saw, from the little I have seen of it, there are stocks involved, there are properties. It plays like a Monopoly game in some sort, but it almost feels like, kind of like daily existence of a Japanese salaryman.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
But yeah, didn't the Wii game have Mario characters?
Yes. So I think that was the big draw of it, is like, I think it was a Nintendo game, but it had crossover with Dragon Quest characters.
Yeah, they're known for their crossovers. They crossed over with Final Fantasy also.
Yeah, there's actually, I believe that just earlier this year they released a game with like both Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy characters.
Yeah, interesting. So I don't have much experience with it. Masa, do you have any experience with it?
No. Like I have only, because the Wii game is actually like one of the like more collectible Wii games, at least in the US. It's not a
really.
Yeah, it's not a easy game to find, and since it's such a niche title, it is like one of the. I don't know. I haven't played the game. I know what it's roughly like. Like, I mean, I knew that it's basically a like Monopoly, but yeah. I mean, I haven't played myself. Maybe I would get a copy if I, found a cheap one. But it usually, like, even in Europe, it usually goes for around like 40 to 50 euros.
Jesus.
That's expensive. That's not what I have seen here. Here, you could probably get it for like $20.
Yeah.
That's been my experience at the very least. Masa, let me ask you something. Was there a culture in Finland for party games? Because I'm really curious about your experience with party games.
Back in the NES days, not so much. Because like I mentioned in our beat 'em up episode, like in the Soviet Finland, like we didn't really have that many arcades to begin with, so we never really had that culture here. At least it wasn't the same as in the US. And
Soviet Finland, you work.
Yeah.
You don't party.
Yeah, exactly. And on the NES, you had the NES Satellite. I never owned it. I never even knew anyone who, owned that little thing.
Yeah.
So I like the games, like, for example, Super Off-Road. I played that game, but never with 4 players. And I would say in Finland, it was the... Like, we will get to this later, but it was the N64 that really, made party games big.
Absolutely.
Well, maybe we can talk about that next generation of party games.
Yeah, so that's... whatever the Satellite did or did not do, it certainly did not stop developers from thinking that there was a market for 4-player games on systems. And when the SNES came out, There were definitely a lot more games that supported multiplayer play. Super Bomberman is probably the one that most people would think of, just because it came in the big box with the Hudson multi-tap, which is the de facto Super Nintendo multi-tap.
So let me take a step back. Did the original Bomberman for NES have a multiplayer option?
I believe it had a 2-player option, but as far as I could tell, it was not satellite supported.
Okay.
But Paul would know.
Well, no, I wouldn't. I was gonna actually mention something else. When we're going back to 16-bit, truthfully, the multiplayer system was the TurboGrafx PC Engine. Because it had one controller port, and in order to play 2-player games, you had to buy the multi-tap, which, as a way to market your system, was a great way of shooting yourself in the foot. But it meant that most people had multi-taps. So when I was a kid, we played Battle Royale, which was the wrestling game, and we played that with multiple players. Dungeon Explorer, which is the Gauntlet clones, so to speak, but more like RPG elements. And most importantly, Bomberman 93. Mm-hmm. Bomberman 93, as far as I know, was the first, truly multiplayer Bomberman game, and you could play up to 5 players. And I remember playing that game. We didn't really know anything about it. We just used to get TurboGrafx games back then used whenever we could. Bomberman 93 cost $10 or whatever. And we brought it home, and it was a revelation. We'd never played anything like it. There were 4 of us playing, and we put hours and hours and hours into that game, coming up with lingo for it, with strategies, and unbelievable.
Well, I feel like Bomberman now has become, since the 90s, synonymous with party games.
100%.
Maybe not like Mario Party, but with hardcore gamers, Bomberman is the party game to go to.
Yeah.
And
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we can talk about the Saturn game later on, which is the definitive version of a Bomberman party game. But this is why it's encouraging to see Konami kind of bringing back Bomberman, one of the very few properties that, since they acquired Hudson, there's so many properties that are just sitting there dormant. But for the Switch, they actually brought out the new Bomberman, which was encouraging, even if it was probably a little bit overpriced. But yeah, I do feel like Bomberman is kind of synonymous nowadays with the party game. And Bomberman 93, did it have 4 players?
5.
Up to 5.
Yeah, the PC Engine multi-tap has up to 5 players. And I think, geez man, any multiplayer game for the PC Engine was either 2 or 5. You know what I mean? 3 and 4, I'm not really aware. I'm not saying that they're not out there, but Battle Royale, for example, is a wrestling game, right? And you can play a tag team mode, but the game is called Battle Royale, right? So you could have 5 characters in there at once, and that's kind of how all the games were designed. You have this multi-tap up to 5, so when we make our game, we're making it up to 5 people.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that's the intrinsic appeal of any sort of multi-tap or controller port expander is when you see the number of controllers, it's you can have up to this many plugins.
You want to fill them.
Immediately you're I want this many.
Yeah, and you start thinking about all the friends that you can bring over.
Yeah, exactly. It's how can I rig this up to support as many people as possible?
So let's talk a little bit more about semantics. Would you consider sports games to be party games? So the NHL games and the like. I mean, there are some that support, certainly quite a few that support more than 2 players. Some that even support up to 8 players, which was always surprising to me. But would you consider those games party games?
If your party doesn't involve girls, yes.
Absolutely. Well, okay, so this is one of those sad Super Nintendo stories from my past. But when you guys were playing, Secret of Mana, Final Fantasy, whatever, Chrono Trigger, I was playing NHL 94, 95, 96, 97, and those are sadly easily my most played Super Nintendo games. I played those over and over again, well, alone, but also with my friends. And even today, well, not so much the past couple of years, but a few years ago, the NHL, whatever was the latest game, was our ultimate party game, because okay, this is gonna sound sad again, but like a bunch of like single guys gathering around every fucking Friday, you know, having beers and playing NHL over and over and over again every fucking weekend. And we were, you know, sometimes we were playing like on the same team, sometimes playing against each other, but yeah, that was the party game for us.
Yeah, I think that sports games definitely qualify. You know, a lot of the same feelings of joy and rage that I associate with a lot of party games, I feel when I play, you know, The Show, when I play NBA Jam, or, you know, NFL, or, you know, NHL, any of these games, like...
Did you just put MLB The Show and NBA Jam in the same sentence?
I just did.
Oh my god, dude.
Hell
You cannot
yeah.
compare those two.
Yeah.
NBA
I'm not
Jam is
comparing them.
like...
I'm just saying that
That's like polar opposites. Really.
they allow
man.
you to have that same sense of, like, you know, just frenetic energy, like, you know, enjoyment of other people's company.
Well, I think also sports games lend themselves very well to a large number of players because you have large teams.
Yep.
So I think when I was growing up, one of the appeals to having a multi-tap was, okay, well, someone can be the right fielder, someone can be the pitcher, someone can be the batter. And they're like, and yes, I am bringing up baseball, Paul. So that really called out to me. So I think that makes them very accessible to a large group of players.
Yeah. Well,
if they're interested in that sport and they're males and not.
and this is sort of tangential, but there is something to be said about, especially in the like licensed sports game world. I'm much more invested in a sports team that I like and I follow than I am in playing as Waluigi in, like, Mario Party.
I agree.
You know what I mean? Like,
you would rather play as Michael Jordan than Waluigi.
absolutely.
That's totally true. So, what other games from the 16-bit era that you guys recall that you remember as being what we would call a party game?
I think Bomberman is the standout for me. While not a party game, I would want to shout out Secret of Mana.
Yeah.
Because the idea of, let alone 2 people, but 3 people sitting around and playing a full-fledged action RPG, I mean, to this day, I still think that's super interesting, and, like, I'd like to see that again. But back in the Super Nintendo age, that would have blown my fucking mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here, and I'm like really, like, I have always liked co-op games since the NES days, and nowadays I love RPGs, but of course there's Tales of series, but even in that one, like, only the battles are, like, multiplayer. So I don't think we have anything like Secret of Mana.
Yeah.
So Masa, tell me about the Nintendo 64 era for you, because I think we can move on, because this is kind of the peak
This is gonna
of
be
the
it.
party game. This is really what the gist of our attention will be on. So it seems like Finland also had this peak. So tell us a little bit more about it.
Okay, so the PS1, I would say that was the console of that era, but at least in Finland, like, N64 was still huge, and a lot of my friends had the console, and of course, we would play all these, like, really classic, like, multiplayer games, like Diddy Kong Racing, Perfect Dark, Mario Kart 64, of course the Mario Party games as well, but the game was, of course, GoldenEye.
Of course.
And, okay, so this is, once again, one of those, like, old memories, which is you will either find this, like, really cool or really sad, but there was this one summer, it was me and, 3 or 4 friends of mine, and we were, like, around 14, 15, and none of us had summer jobs. So what we would do, like, we would play GoldenEye every single day that summer. Like, from morning until like evening, and that was the entire summer. Nothing but GoldenEye.
You have my seal of approval.
Dude, do you know how many of our 10 listeners are nodding along with you right now?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
No, but I do feel, I mean, maybe you want to take this on, but the Nintendo 64 was really the console, I think, by virtue of the fact that it had 4 ports.
Oh, yeah. Out the box.
That really made such a massive difference. And there's also another element of it. It was not only the 4 ports, but also the fact that the games were so much more expensive. And so the games that you had, you needed to kind of justify the purchase. Mm-hmm. And so usually people had more than one controller. And it kind of became the playground kind of system where the kids, after being out in the streets and the like, after coming home from school, and they would settle down into the garage, they would start playing the Nintendo 64. At least that was my memory. I came to this country around that era, and that was kind of what the kids did. The Nintendo 64 was kind of the system where everyone just got together and played, whereas the PlayStation 1 was kind of the system for single-player, different, massive experiences. But the Nintendo 64 has endured because of that multiplayer focus, really, and I would say it's the definitive multiplayer system.
Absolutely.
What do you say, Arnie?
Absolutely. It's like they took Paul's advice, and instead of doing one controller port like the TurboGrafx, they took that multi-tap and just crammed it in there, and we're like, here you go.
Oh, by the way, can we just say how awesome it is that you don't need ports anymore in systems?
Yeah.
Can we just admit that that's a great advance in technology? But yeah, I mean, I you would be surprised to not find a Nintendo 64 in a dorm or a frat house in the United States. For a brief time, when I was studying for the bar, I had to live in this house because my lease ran out. And it was with a bunch of undergrad students. And, dude, every night, the focus of it, and this was very recent, it was the Nintendo 64. They may not know anything about video games. They may not care about video games. They may have lapsed and not have played an actual video game to completion for over 2 decades. Yeah. But they're still going to play the shit out of Smash Brothers. Well, they're still going to play the shit out of Mario Kart. Yeah. And that's another thing. The Nintendo 64, great system for both genders. Everyone... female, male, loves the Nintendo 64.
Yeah, good point.
They can play it. I know just as many women that play Mario Kart as I know men that play Mario Kart. It's a system, it's an egalitarian system in many ways.
So I dated this girl a long time ago, and she had Mario Kart 64, right? I didn't actually own Mario Kart 64, I just put it at my friends' houses, so I wasn't really, good at it or whatever.
You destroyed her.
But no, let me tell you. I don't want to give away the ending, but yes, that is part of it. But it's actually even worse than that. Like, we had just started dating, and she was something to do. Like, I didn't really like her that much. And so I went over to her place, and we were playing Mario Kart, and she fucking ruined me. And not only did she ruin me, she was doing it by, like, taking these shortcuts that I wasn't aware of. And I was getting kind of chafed, right? I was young and competitive, and this girl's taking these shortcuts. And so I started kind of getting a little mouthy, and I'm like, hey, why don't you beat me with those shortcuts? You need those shortcuts to win. I wouldn't shut up about the goddamn shortcuts, right? And, we didn't talk again.
But yeah, that reminds me of like when I was in Japan in 2007, for a few months I was studying there, and it was like one of those, like at the dorm they had N64, and this was 2007, so a few years after the console had like died, and they had GoldenEye, and I was like, oh shit, GoldenEye, let's play it, and I absolutely.
Then you realized that was a terrible idea.
Yeah, I mean, no, it was like I absolutely like slaughtered these dudes because I kind of used the same tactic as Paul's ex-girlfriend. Like I knew where where people would spawn. I knew where to get the body armor. So I would just, like whenever I got a few hits, I would, go pick up the body armor, and then I would just go straight to like where people would spawn and just, kill them right away. And I'm quite sure that after that, none of these people ever played GoldenEye again.
Well, now that you mentioned that, Masa, it reminds me that GoldenEye is the first quote-unquote party game that I remember seeing in Cuba. And it was actually a revelation in Cuba, which is not normal because there weren't that many 64s in Cuba. And the GoldenEye, it was like in everyone's mouth. Every kid wanted to play that game. And it was just everyone huddled around the kid that had it, and everyone would go to that house. Even if they didn't know the kid. It was like, look, dude, I'm showing up at your place, and we're holding a competition, and you're going to take it. So that's the actual, now that I remember, it jogged my memory that GoldenEye was the first game I remember kind of seeing in Cuba where people had 4 players around the table just kind of going at it. So
this is how you know that the Nintendo 64 is like probably one of the definitive party systems ever. Is like, you ask people like, what Nintendo 64 games do you remember playing? And within the first 2 to 3 games, they're going to say GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, Mario Kart, like a game that's 4-player that they remember playing with their friends.
Yeah, and also shout out to the fact that there are almost no surviving controller joysticks for the Nintendo 64. Because of this era, all of them Mario are Party. Just... Yes, Mario Party. So maybe this is a good time to bring up Mario Party. You guys want to talk about it?
Is ever a good time to bring up Mario
the good old tug of war. Oh my god, like that's the mini game that killed both your hands and your controllers. Like, I mean, I had so many blisters and so many broken controllers from like that mini game alone.
Yeah, that was the mini game, I believe, that people complained about, and Nintendo would let you mail out for a N64 glove that they would send you so you could play it without blistering your hand.
Yeah, to prevent the stigmata.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, Mario Party, I mean, it's kind of a variation of, I wouldn't even say Monopoly, but it's kind of a board game.
Yeah.
And it adapts that board game and then throws like 100 minigames into it. And we're now up to 10, right, Masa, maybe?
Yeah, there's 10, there's 10 like home console games and a few portable games.
Yep.
Yeah, and so you kind of roll the dice, there are 4 players. Roll the dice, and after all the players go through their turn, there's a minigame, and I think the purpose of it is to get as many stars as possible, at least in most games. And the minigames vary wildly. Some of them are 1-on-3, some of them are 2-on-2, some of them are free-for-all. And in the interest of full disclosure, last night in research for this episode, we played Mario Party 4. And again, you're going to have to call me Lucky Ozzy because I was the luckiest out of all of them. I wasn't. I did.
If the goal is finishing last, then yeah, you're super lucky.
But they're very interesting games. I think that they lend themselves well to a party because they kind of follow the same format as a board game.
Yeah.
And so it's intuitive for people. And just kind of figuring out each minigame and what it is that you have to really do in them, it kind of presents a challenge into itself. And there's always that one player that just gets screwed. And there's always that one player that gets very lucky. I mean, and there's always a CPU player, if you're unfortunately playing with a CPU player, Donkey Kong, that just, is cheap, and you think it's impossible for the CPU to be that cheap.
Yep. No, the Mario Party AI is, like, devious. Like, it acts stupid and somehow still wins.
Well, it's incredible.
Like, has the perfect strategy.
It's like playing against Forrest Gump.
Well, there isn't a sweet spot because, as you said, Arnie, if you put it on easy, then they're just going to be completely drooling.
Yep.
But if you put it on medium, okay, maybe they will take some decisions that you wouldn't have taken.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they would just be like ringers, and they would just be doing everything they're supposed to be doing. And when you have 3 human players that are trying to figure out what the heck they're doing, and a CPU player that already knows, that presents an inherent disadvantage. And also the fact that if you play with bonus stars, then, even if they didn't do well, they're still going to come out on top.
Bonus stars, in my mind, just negate the whole point of everything that preceded it. Especially when you play a shorter game, because people don't get as many stars.
Yeah.
But I will say that Mario Party really made me understand what Schadenfreude is. Joy at other people's misery is the core essence, I think.
Just say it, my misery.
Dude, after 1 hour, Ozzy's face I've never seen such bitterness.
It was despair. It was just abject despair.
Oh my god, it was
I don't know
great.
how a party game made me so depressed. It was terrible. But hot take here. Hot take. Mario Party games are not good games. It's just good that you get to play them with a lot of people. And I think the fact that all the clone games like Crash Bash, Sonic Shuffle, Rayman Arena, they're not good games, I think kind of shows that the biggest reason why Mario Party endures is because, one, it's Mario, and two, because you're playing with people, and there's so much variation. And just by virtue of that, you have so much that can happen in a given game that just presents a lot of opportunity for enjoyment. But Paul, you were saying last night, a lot of Mario Party is just putting your controller down and waiting for everyone else to do their thing.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of, just putting my controller down and waiting. Which is okay, because, again, we're hanging out with other people, right? If this was, me at home, putting my controller down and waiting, well, even that's not bad, because that's Persona 5.
Yeah. Or Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, I mean, they're... but that's apples and oranges, right? The bottom line is, I agree with you, Mario Party, not such a great game, and we're probably going to play it again right after this.
Oh, absolutely.
Certainly.
But you know what's the beautiful thing about Mario Party? Of course it has these mini games that are skill based. You can, if you know how they work, you can easily beat your newbie friends. But then there's the element of luck, in many board games. And I think that's, we have been playing Mario Party 10, a little bit. And, it's, for example, I'm good at some mini games, but it doesn't mean that I'm gonna win, every time. Because there's the element of luck involved. And I think that makes the game fun for everybody except for Ozzy, of course. But and here's the thing, nobody's gonna play a Mario Party game for dozens and dozens of hours. Especially nowadays, since there's still no online play, you might play every once in a while, but you are never gonna get really good at these mini games anyways. And then there's still the whole element of luck involved.
Well, let me tell you, with the Switch, this is Nintendo's perfect opportunity to bring back a great Mario Party game.
Yeah, and that's sorry for interrupting, but that's what I wanted to say. For the longest time, we mentioned that nowadays people, when it comes to party games, it's something that you do at someone's, home or their house. But the Switch has the potential to change that. Now with the Switch, like us, for example, my name's Arnie, who still doesn't have a Switch, but we could go to a nearby bar and, play a party game on the Switch together. We wouldn't have to be, at Ozzy's place, for example.
Yeah, I can give you my example. I was down in Miami where my family is, and I had my Switch with me because now I carry my Switch everywhere. And my brother's wife saw the Switch and she was like, "Oh, you have a Switch?" And I said, "Yes, and I have Overcooked." And oh my god, she just dropped everything and was like, "Let's play Overcooked right now." And the fact that we could play Overcooked without setting anything up in a TV screen or the like, it really unlocks the potential of gaming, and it really could unlock the potential for party games. So the only thing you need for a great party is to bring your Switch. Yeah. Which is probably the best Nintendo advertisement that we've ever done.
Brought to you by Nintendo.
Yeah, exactly.
See, they tried to tell us in those commercials where these hipsters brought their Switch to the rooftop party or
Couldn't
whatever.
stop laughing.
And I was like, this is such bullshit. And now it's but now it's the reality. This is the world we live in now.
If you guys didn't realize, we're Switch true believers.
We're
and Arnie just needs to step into the light.
We're one day you'll just be sitting at somebody's party and somebody will bring out a Switch and be like, "Hey, here we go. It's playtime."
I know. And then I'll be one of those good-looking people on the commercial.
Yeah.
Where I am now.
But this era also, the Nintendo 64 overshadows it so much because it was such a great party console. But there were other great games on other systems. So, as we mentioned, Bomberman on the Saturn. Do you guys have any experience with that? Because it's supposed to be the definitive version of Bomberman.
This is Paul's.
Oh,
this
yeah.
is his time to shine right here.
I played Bomberman on the Saturn, 20 years ago? And I played it again last week. And it was 6 players then, and it's 6 players now. And I actually played the 10-player local Saturn Bomberman twice. You know, it takes some work, but it's worth it. It's worth it if for no other reason than you can just say, hey, I played 10-player Saturn Bomberman, right? You don't even know who you're shit-talking anymore when you have 10 people. It's like, you just kill someone, and it's like, yeah, I just killed you, I don't know who you are.
It's a feat unto itself to bring 10 players together.
Oh, yeah.
So it just makes you feel so gratified and fulfilled. It's like, I have 10 friends.
That's half the fun. Like, honestly, the game could be terrible, and just bringing 10 people together to play a terrible game would still be fun, but it's not terrible, it's Bomberman. And, we still go back to Saturn Bomberman. That's the definitive version. And I know the N64 is kind of like the de facto party machine of that era, but the fact that the Saturn had a 6-player multi-tap, there were some games for it that were just, we poured hours and hours and hours.
Such as?
Guardian Heroes.
Yes.
Yeah, because Guardian Heroes has the 6-player versus mode, and we had everything set up for it. Like, we had systems that ranked characters, we had moves that were banned. It was really deep. And sometimes we played 3 versus 3, sometimes we played 3 teams of 2, or 6-player free-for-all. The sky was the limit. There was so much variation. Guardian Heroes also tracked statistics, so it would save on the Saturn's hard drive, and you load up your profile, and man, it was so good.
Is there a more bizarre game that just completely breaks any definitions that you try to throw at it?
It defies genre.
It just completely crosses every genre you could think of. You could think of it as a beat 'em up. You could think of it as an action adventure. You could think of it as a party game. You could think of it as a brawler. It's such an innovative game that it's so sad that we haven't seen a game like that. Maybe Code of Princes, but come on. It's really unfortunate that there isn't something that's quite reached the heights of Guardian Heroes.
Saturn, I will say. Go ahead, Paul.
No, I was gonna say which is okay. Maybe not. I was gonna say it's okay because we still have Guardian Heroes. But
you need to find a Saturn. You need to find a multi-tap and
to draw in new players.
I didn't see a Saturn in the flesh until maybe 3 years ago. That's how uncommon they really are.
Yeah.
It's the same in Europe.
Saturn Bomberman is the height of hubris. Like, somebody was like, we have a 6-player multi-tap, but what if we plugged in a second multi-tap? And that person worked on Saturn Bomberman.
Can we say that
that
was an early LAN party?
Oh,
basically.
That was
basically. And between Guardian Heroes and Bomberman, there was another game we played more than both of those combined, which I also played last week. And I've mentioned this to you guys before, but a lot of our listeners probably won't know about this game. It's a hidden game inside the Sega Saturn version of Duke Nukem 3D called Death Tank.
Actually, Power Slave.
Both.
Both?
Yeah.
Yes.
I said Duke Nukem. Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. Originally, it was in Power Slave, and it was Death Tank. And then they had Death Tank Sway in Duke Nukem 3D. And those games are incredible. I just played it last week, and we were shouting at the screen and yelling at each other, and it's not even an exaggeration.
And what do you do? What's the point?
If you've played Scorched Earth, it's very similar to that. The best way I can describe it without putting people to sleep is to call it a real-time Worms. So in Worms, you have time to set up your shot, you have to, pick up your weapon, and so on and so forth. In Death Tank, it all happens in real time.
Okay.
The graphics are horrible. Your tank is like a little square, and that's part of the charm.
Dude, it's probably a game that they put together in a weeknight where they were really drunk, and they were like, freak it, let's just put it in there.
I read an interview with the creator. I can't remember his name, unfortunately, but anybody can look it up if they want. And that was basically it. They were working on ports of FPS games for the Sega Saturn. So these guys weren't, they weren't creating anything new. They were just coders, right? Yeah. And so, they worked on Death Tank and threw it in, and lo and behold, you have what, in my opinion, is the best multiplayer game ever. But, there are certain intangibles there, too, that part of the fun of Death Tank, I hate to say it because it sounds kind of hipster, is that it feels like you're in a secret club and you know about Death Tank, right? That's part of the appeal.
Well, it actually came out on Xbox Live.
It did.
So there was some update to Death Tank, but nothing quite as...
Well, the problem with the Xbox Live version, which makes no sense whatsoever, is that it was maximum 4 players. And Death Tank's way on the Saturn was maximum 7. And we routinely had 7 players playing that game.
So I must imagine it must have been chaotic with 7 players.
Yeah. Oh, it was great. Yeah. I can't describe it any better than that. And
well,
if you guys allow me, I won't shut up about it. So let's move on.
Well, should we go pick up a multi-tap?
I mean, I think the only other big game that we really need to hit on as far as sort of big party games, I would say, is Twisted Metal. It's like the PS1 sort of... It's a genre unto itself, I think, is what it is.
The vehicular combat genre really proliferated in this era with Twisted Metal, and there was another one called Rogue Trip and Vigilante 8 and the like, which was also on the Nintendo 64. I can also say that this was the era of four-player split screen.
Yeah.
And screen hacking was a thing back in the day. That wasn't the case with Twisted Metal, but at least it was for games like GoldenEye. I never took to vehicular combat games. I always found them fairly boring, but I know that there are a bunch of people that absolutely love them. And Twisted Metal 2 being the halcyon and idyllic representation of the vehicular combat game. And also, shout out Gauntlet Legends on the PS1 and the Dreamcast. Fantastic game to play with a couple of friends. Someone plays the dwarf, someone plays the mage. It's just, I put in so many hours into that game that I really think that it's one of the perennial great party games.
Bringing it full circle.
Yeah.
Gauntlet Arcade all the way to Gauntlet Home.
And it's funny because after the Nintendo 64 with the 4 ports, controller ports, we went on to the 32-bit era. And the 32-bit era, all consoles except for the PlayStation 2 had 4 ports. So you had the Xbox, you had the GameCube, and you had the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast had great party games, namely Power Stone.
Yep.
So maybe you guys can tell me a little bit more about your experience with Power Stone, because I think that's one of the greatest party games of all time.
I'll go first, as I have 0 experience with Power Stone. So that's my contribution. Well, Masa, have you played Power Stone?
Yeah, I actually own the Dreamcast version, which I have played a few times, but then, actually the version that I played more is the arcade version, which is really surprising since I've been talking about, not really, going to the arcades back in the day, but there's actually a arcade in my hometown, and they have Power Stone, and, I've been to that place a few times, and that's one of our go-to games, and it's definitely one of the most unique fighting games that I've ever played.
Yeah, I didn't even realize there was an arcade version of Power Stone.
Me neither.
That sounds amazing.
I didn't realize that. Well,
that's amazing. There's an arcade game that I have played, but you guys haven't. What is this?
Well, Paul,
is
do you
this
have any
the opposite day or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the only thing about Power Stone is that I actually played it before it came out stateside. And
Paul, you're such a hipster today. What the hell's going on?
I don't know what's
going on. Is it being in New York?
Yeah, it's rubbing off on me along with the smell of pee. No, I played it at an anime convention. There was a video game tournament, and I made it to the finals, and that's where they kind of unveiled in the Wizards Super Mario 3 fashion this game that nobody had played, Power Stone on the Dreamcast, and I won. And I was king of the nerds.
Well, the Dreamcast also, we should mention, was kind of the advent of online party games, basically. And Shushu Rocket and all the Unreal games and the like, Quake and the like, which were the large-scale, FPSs and the like. And I would argue it's also where we can see the decline of the traditional party games, because the Dreamcast is really the console that introduced online gaming. It wasn't until the Xbox that there was really a popularization of online gaming. But the Dreamcast certainly, I mean, they kind of set the scene with Phantasy Star, with the NFL games, and the like. And I think that's really what we start seeing, a kind of downshift in the traditional party games. It was a very short-lived peak in a way.
This is, I mean, for how much we praise the N64 and like its focus on, 4 players, split screen, like party games. Party games were never, at least in my opinion, never like a major sort of genre unto themselves. Yeah,
it's not something that you really crave to play on your own or anything. I mean, it sucks to play a party game.
It's a nice option to have.
What a depressing
thing. Yeah, that's depressing. Can you imagine you have like 4 different controllers and you like switch controllers every single
man?
That would be extremely depressing.
Yeah, I mean, when you really look back on this list, with the exception of Mario Kart and Smash, a lot of these games aren't really relevant anymore. They're not doing a whole lot. Force player split screen is no longer really a thing.
Well, let's talk about Smash. I think we should really talk about Smash because it was Mario Party. That was the perennial party game. And then Super Smash Bros. Came along. And I don't think Nintendo really realized how much that game would blow up. And to this day, I mean, it's like I say, it's accessible. And if you are a hardcore gamer, you can really learn the ins and outs of Super Smash Bros. But every person can play it. Yeah. And it's not as technical as a Soul Calibur or as a Virtua Fighter or the like.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, you could make it there. You could get it there. But it's a game that anyone can just pick up and play. And with recognizable characters beating on each other. Which always reminds me of the commercial that came out back in 1999 where Pikachu and Mario start beating the crap out of each other. That's one of the perennial great commercials.
Yeah, if Saturn Bomberman is the height of hubris, then Smash Brothers is the height of wish fulfillment. Like, Mario, Donkey Kong, Yoshi, Star Fox, all these amazing characters, and now it's like you can play as all of them and like beat the crap out of them.
And eventually Solid Snake, so that the adults can join in too.
Exactly. And now Bayonetta, and Pac-Man, like they've gone above and beyond to get all these crazy licenses. Do you guys have any like particular Smash Brothers stories?
I actually don't. Masa?
First of all, like I have never actually played the N64 Smash Bros. I know this sounds really weird coming from the Nintendo dude here, but Melee, I played the shit out of that game, but it was still, I don't know, I think that was the time when a lot of my friends kind of like fell out of love with gaming. So for me, it was more like me just playing alone and then, maybe having some friends come over every once in a while. So I never really got good at that game. I actually ended up skipping Brawl. But the Wii U game, that's definitely, that has been one of our, like in my group of, like in my circle of friends, that has been like one of the, like the biggest like party game hits. Especially like, it's amazing playing that game, but it's both amazing and extremely chaotic playing that game with like 8 players. It's just absolutely insane. Like you have no idea what's going on, but it's still fun. And that's like, I mean, I've mentioned this before, but like the beauty of a lot of these Nintendo games is that, like for example, Smash Bros. Like, you can play it as a party game, but then you can also play it as a really, really high level, like a professional fighting game. Yeah, like it's always like one of the top Evo games, for example. And when you compare like, okay, so let's see, like, when I play Street Fighter and then I watch, like, EVO matches, I'm like, okay, so that's the same game that I'm playing, but when I'm playing Smash Bros. And then I'm watching people, like, actual professionals play the game, it's like 2 different games, like, they are pulling out moves that I can't even do, and it's, it looks so much different. But that's great. What's great about this Nintendo, especially like games like, Splatoon and Smash Bros., like they are both like very casual experiences, but then also you can turn them into like really high level games.
Yeah,
that's the secret sauce, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Easy to pick up and play, difficult to master, and a lot of depth.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, that's a good place to sort of wrap up this conversation on party games. I think Smash is probably the party game that most people sort of gravitate to now, especially if you have any sort of Nintendo console.
Yeah, because Mario Party is kind of a non-entity now. Mario Party 10 came and went
not around.
Without any type of noise.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about if they now announced Mario Party 11 for the Switch, there would be a few people who would be like, yay, but the hype surrounding the new Smash Bros game for the Switch, it's insane. All this, Twitter, Instagram, message boards, there's it's insane. All these people are speculating who's gonna join and what the gameplay will be like, and the hype surrounding that game is massive. And I mean, that probably is the biggest fighting game franchise nowadays.
But I do think that the party game is making a resurgence, and not in the traditional way that we think about it. I think that it's coming back in the way of local 4-player co-op or competitive gaming. So Overcooked is one of the more recent successes, and that one has just really done gangbusters. It's basically come out on every system under the sun. And as you said, Smash Brothers. Mario Kart is still freaking massive. Mario Kart is still... Any new Mario Kart, I mean, the fact that they could release Mario Kart on the Wii U, and it was a hit, and then they released the same game on the Switch, and it was an even greater hit, that shows you the power of Mario Kart. Anyone will always be down for some good old Mario Karting. And again, they're games that became ingrained into the mentality of gamers at a time where they were very susceptible, and it was just formative to their character and their personalities and their experiences. Yeah. So if there's someone that has a Mario Kart or a Mario, Super Smash Brothers, they're going to want to rekindle that experience. They're going to want to go back to those times where they spent a whole summer playing GoldenEye every single day.
Yeah. No, I mean, especially during this time, I feel like there was also a surge in not necessarily party games, but FPSs really became the standard bearer for your come over with your friends, sit down and play a game together. I vividly remember having to drag not only a CRT television, but a second Xbox to my friend's house to link them together to play 4-player Halo on two televisions.
Yeah, dude. You could play with 16 players.
It was amazing.
Oh yeah. And everyone was in the same room.
It was worth the muscles I pulled in my back as a 14-year-old kid.
But yeah, I mean, online gaming kind of killed local co-op, and it's really, really unfortunate because it killed the local party game. And so that's why you still see the Nintendo 64 kind of being the classical party console. Yeah. But I am really hoping that the Switch is kind of the next step in bringing back local co-op. I really do think so, and I think the Switch is the future. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Yeah. So hopefully, but actually we haven't touched upon something. Guys, what are your thoughts on 1-2-Switch?
Masa.
Oh Lord.
Okay, so
tell us how much you love it.
Yeah, I own hundreds of games, and I even own a lot of games that I bought, for the full price, day one, paid 60 euros for them, and I have I don't really regret buying any games, but there's one game in my collection that I really, really regret buying, and that's 1-2-Switch, and I paid fucking 50 euros for it. Played it for, I don't know, I played it 2 or 3 times with a group of friends. We all hated that game, and I was like, yeah, did I really just spend 50 euros on this?
I mean, who would have thunk that a game including milking cows and listening to see how many ice cubes are in your controller would not be fun.
Sweet HD Rumble, man.
HD Rumble.
Yeah, and even that, okay, so yeah, the HD Rumble thing is really cool, actually. But then the novelty wears off, after 5 minutes, and then it's I never want to play this again.
Just you wait until the Switch 2.0 where they have 4K Rumble.
You imagine they come out with a brand new 1-2 Switch, and you're like, why did this happen? Nobody asked for this.
But yeah, I mean, there's a huge difference between like the Wii launch with Wii Sports, and like let's say you can take bowling, and that's like hours and hours of multiplayer fun. Yeah. But like I mean, 1-2 Switch is like maybe an hour of multiplayer fun for €50.
Yeah.
Wii Sports was definitely like, if there was like a best tech demo / pack-in game ever, it'd probably be
no question.
Wii Sports.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not since the original Super Mario Bros.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, best party game ever. It's senior home approved. If your nanny can play this, and have fun while she's at it, then that makes it the best party game of all time.
We had a Wii at work at one of my old jobs, and it was like an office job. And my buddy and I, we'd take like 5-10 minutes. So I'd kind of like look over into his cubicle, and we'd nod, and then run and get a quick game of Wii Tennis in.
Oh yeah,
and then head back to our desks.
There have been few things that have induced like a competitive fire in me, like Wii Tennis.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I've never, I shouldn't say I've never. The amount of shit talking that went into Wii Tennis versus what was kind of deserved for a tennis game, very out of proportion. Yeah.
But I think this segues somewhat interestingly, since we're talking about, sort of how the party game has evolved. It's pretty clear that a lot of modern games have sort of done away with the local multiplayer. Local multiplayer doesn't seem to be a focus, really, now that there's such easy access to online gaming.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just throw the general question out to you guys. Do you think that there is a place for local multiplayer still? Do you think that it should come back?
I think so. And you're seeing it now with virtual reality gaming. Mm-hmm. Some of them are actual like party games. Don't Stop Talking and Nobody Explodes. That's one of them. The Playroom VR, where all the 4 players participate. So yeah, I do think that there is a place for local party games. Paul?
Yeah, 100%. In my home, there will always be a place for multiplayer gaming. Look, playing online with a bunch of 10-year-olds, I know that's like, the stereotypical thing, and it doesn't always happen, but it does, and I don't want to play with them. But listen to our podcast and subscribe, all you 10-year-olds, please. You guys are always welcome here.
All right, Masa, what's your take?
Absolutely, and I think it's a shame that nowadays, especially like, okay, so Nintendo is an exception because they have always been more about the local experiences compared to like multiplayer. But yeah, it's definitely a sad trend that, for example, just recently I got this game on the PS4 called Armello. And it's a digital role-playing strategy board game. Yeah, I mean, it's a board game. And it has multiplayer, but it's only online. And I'm like, why? Like, that makes no freaking sense that there's no local multiplayer. Especially since it's not even like, I understand if you have a game like let's say Call of Duty or something like that it's might just be like online only, but I mean, it's a board game. It should have local, multiplayer.
100%.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those situations where we didn't realize what we lost until it was gone.
Yeah.
Because, like, you have the N64 and you have the local party games, and that's great. That's like the height of fun for gaming. Then the advent of online game comes on, and it's way more convenient. Everybody's super excited about it, and they're not quite thinking about what we've lost, which is the human interaction. And hopefully we'll see a swing back towards that, people realizing, hey, maybe I do want to shit talk Ozzy in person instead of online, and see the bitterness in his eyes.
No, I mean, for me, I agree with all of you. Like, I definitely do think it should come back. I think it's one of the best aspects of gaming. But 90% of it for me is like, I want to look you in the eye as I talk copious amounts of shit to you.
Yeah. And I want to not look you in the eye as I take it.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to choose to ignore you as you, like, destroy me. And that's, that's the part of it that I miss the most. So I wanted to wrap up rapid fire like we usually do. Favorite party game of all time? I'm gonna throw it to Paul first.
For me, it's almost like 1 and 1A, right? The most amount of time that I've spent with party games was Guardian Heroes and Death Tank. We played way more Death Tank, and gosh, my favorite's Guardian Heroes, even though we still play way more Death Tank. It's got the treasure charm, right? So,
alright. Ozzy.
Crash Bash.
Crash Bash.
Crash Bash.
No explanation.
I know you said rapid fire, but like I want to know what's going on here.
No explanation. I was just a big fan of Crash back in the day. So just from a purely nostalgic standpoint. And I didn't have a Nintendo 64 until many, many years later. So you know what? I had to do with Crash Bash.
It's Crash Bash, and I've never played it. Is it like a Mario Party style game?
Like a Mario Party style game. Yeah.
That was actually good?
I loved it.
Define good. Alright, Masa.
GoldenEye, all day, every day.
Oh, jeez. I should have seen that one coming.
Alright, so I guess that leaves me, and I would have to say, like the typical party game, it probably would be GoldenEye, with Halo, the original Halo being like the 1A to that. So I think that about wraps it up. I think we had a pretty decent discussion about this. Maybe there's still so many freaking party games we just did not have time to talk about.
This is like tip of the iceberg.
I know. But maybe we'll come back to it at some point.
Maybe.
So let's quickly go around and just let people know where they can find us. Masa.
Okay, so yeah, you can find me on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is masacharvinen09. It's a bit like, okay, so here's the thing, like my last name is actually pronounced Järvinen, but I guess Jarvinen makes it a little bit easier for our listeners to find me.
I never would have guessed, actually. I would have said Jarvinen.
Okay,
right,
so... yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So yeah, Paul.
You can find me on Instagram, Paul's Game Room, Paul's_Game Room.
You can find me, Ozzy, at Shadow of the Collector, with periods in between all of those words.
You can find me on Instagram, Welcome to the Game. It's the word welcome, the number 2, the game. Please write us a review wherever you're listening to this. Even leave us a comment on our Instagrams. We also have a Region Free Gamers Instagram that you can comment on, ask us questions, interact with us. We love all that stuff. Tell your friends, tell your family. And just remember, guys, there ain't no party like a Mario Party, because the Mario Party does not stop until Donkey Kong whoops your ass. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.